crying. She's trying to do it silently, but from the back seat of the car I can see her shoulders heaving up and down, her entire body racked by sobs. I look out the window in the darkness flowing past our car, and all the pinpoints of light on the horizon seem far, far away. My mother always cries now. In the beginning, back in the summer, I used to try to comfort her. Used to ask her stupidly, "Is something wrong?" And she'd force her face into some tortured mask of fake happiness, her smile trembling, her eyes still brimming with tears. "Oh no, dear, nothing's wrong. Would you like some milk and cookies?" That was before today. Before my father hustled the three of us into the car. We drove for hours and hours across unfamiliar states, the light fading, the roads we are on getting smaller and smaller, more and more remote. I do not know why my mother's crying. I do not know where we're going. I could ask about our destination, if nothing else, 1,000 times today. I've started to open my mouth, started to squeak out, "Can you tell me?" But then I'd look into the front seat at my mother's silent shaking, my father's grim profile, the mournful bags beneath his eyes, and all the questions I might ask seem abusive. Assault and battery, a question mark used like a club. My parents are old and fragile. I'd have to be heartless to want to hurt them. A red traffic signal flashes overhead, and my father comes to a complete stop and stares at the empty crossroads for whole minutes before inching forward. He's an insanely careful driver. My mother is too, or was before she started crying all the time and stopped doing anything else. I turn my head, looking away from both my parents. We're on the outskirts of a small town now. I squint out the window at a dark sign half hidden in bushes. "Welcome to." It's something field, the letters in the middle covered by branches. Springfield? Summerfield? I've lost track of what state we're in. Indiana? Illinois? Could we possibly have crossed over into Iowa? Maybe one of those I states has a cluster of seasonal villages I've never heard of. Springfield, Summerfield, Winterfield, Autumnfield. Maybe Mom and Dad are just taking me on yet another educational field trip, like when we went to the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. I can't quite believe this, but the thought cheers me up a little. Even educational field trips are better than sobbing and grimness. A row of fast food restaurants glows on the other side of my window, and this cheers me too. Even though I'm not hungry, Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, so well lit, so safe, so sane, so ordinary. I'm so busy wallowing in the comfort of their garish lights that I almost miss hearing the first words spoken in our car in hours. "Those are new," my father murmurs. I glance again at the golden arches outside my window. Nothing looks particularly new to me, but has my father been in this town before? My mother doesn't answer him. Still, I peer out the window with renewed interest. In a matter of minutes, we come to a town square with soaring courthouse and quaint row of shops. The shops are closed, their signs dark. Spring Summerfield has gone into hibernation for the night or the winter or maybe even the entire century. Our headlights throw a brief glow on a flaking away billboard on the side of a building. I could swear part of the sign is still advertising a circus from 2006. Years ago. My father turns into a residential street, turns again, and then once more. He pulls up to the curb and shuts off the engine in front of a dark house surrounded by huge trees. The sudden silence is horrifying and seems to catch my mother off guard. A tiny whimper escapes her. The sound amplified in the stillness. Surely, my father hears her now. Surely he and I can't go on pretending she isn't crying. "Wait here," my father says. He does not look at Mom or me. He gets out of the car and gently shuts the door. He stands still for a second, looking at the house. Then he opens the wrought iron gate and walks slowly toward the front door. The streamlights illuminate little more than a square or two of sidewalk, so I can barely see my father as he hobbles up the porch steps. I squint. I imagine that he is pressing a doorbell now, maybe tapping lightly on a screen door. All I can hear is my mother gulping in air in the front seat. Her shudders are practically convulsive now. I reach out, planning to put a comforting hand on her shoulder, but before I can touch her, she plunges forward, burying her face in her hands, sobbing harder. I pull back. Up on the porch, a light clicks on, warm and bright and startling after all the darkness. I can see everything on the porch now. It's enormous, wrapping around the entire front of the house and the sides as well. Sometimes I play a game where I pretend I'm a movie set designer. This porch would fit very well into one of those heartwarming family dramas set in the early 1900s. I can picture a dozen children dressed in lacy dresses and knickers lounging on all the white wicker chairs, whiling away long summer afternoons, playing marbles and checkers, whispering innocent secrets, laughing at innocent jokes. The porch is a happy-looking place, and my father, burdened, stooped shoulders, cadaverously thin, doesn't seem to belong on it. The door opens and a woman appears. I can't see her face very well, but she has white hair and is wearing a plush red dressing gown, or robe. I know it's just an ordinary robe, but I've gotten into that old-fashioned mindset. The woman surprises me by stepping out onto the porch and throwing her arms around my father. He stands there awkwardly, like he's not sure he wants to be hugged. He glances back anxiously toward our car, toward Mom and me. The woman releases him from the hug, but still keeps one hand on his arm. She says something I can't hear. I glance toward the front seat again, where my mother still has her face buried, trying not to hear or see anything. I reach over and grip a knob on the door beside me. We are the only people I know who still have manual controls rolling our car windows up and down. This is a fairly new car, only a year old, so my dad must have asked for the non-electric controls special. Maybe even paid extra. Usually I'm embarrassed that my parents are so low tech, but tonight I'm grateful. I roll down the window in total silence. My father is answering the woman. "Oh, Mir," he chokes out, "I hate having to ask this of you." He glances towards the car again, and I crouch down into the shadows, hoping it's too dark for him to see a window is opened or closed. The woman pats his arm, cradling her hand against his elbow. "You know, I'd do anything for you and Hill," she says. I like her voice. It's throaty and rich. And if I were pretending to be a movie director instead of a set designer, I'd cast her in my historical drama as the wise old governess. Or maybe the kindly housekeeper. "You'd do anything?" my father repeats numbly. "Even now? After?" "Even now," the woman says firmly. My father makes a garbled noise and then begins sobbing, clutching the woman against him, weeping into her shoulder. Unlike my mother, my father does not cry quietly. His wails roll out like a wave of pain, and I scramble to roll up my window. My mother cannot hear that. I cannot bear to hear it myself. I'm not used to my father's crying. I've had no time to harden my heart against him. I sit still for a few minutes, breathing hard, staring at the back of my mother's seat. Crazy. All this is crazy. Why didn't they just let me go to school today like usual? I latch onto that one word, usual, and let it float through my mind a few more times. I call out its brother and sister words, and from a comforting litany, usual, ordinary, normal, safe, sane, typical, sane, safe, typical, ordinary, usual, normal. My parents have never been normal. That's a traitorous thought, and I hunt it down and stomp it dead. I glance back at the scene on the porch, and I'm relieved to see my father's gotten control of himself again. He's not clutching the woman in the red robe anymore. They're not even touching, just talking earnestly. I roll down my window again. At first, their voices are indistinct. It's like they're trying not to be overheard. I hear my own name once or twice. Bethany is. Bethany does. But the rest of the sentence is always lower pitched, and I can never tell what my father thinks I am or do. Then the woman asks something, and my father shakes his head violently, vehemently. "Oh, no," he says, loud enough for me to hear, loud enough for me to be sure of what he's saying. "She doesn't know anything about Elizabeth." Elizabeth, I think. Something about the name or the way he says it stabs at me. Whoever she is, Elizabeth is important. My father is still shaking his head, and the woman gives her shoulders a slight shrug. "All right, then," she says. "Thank you," my father says. He retreats from the woman and the light beaming out from her porch, and I think, that's it, now we can go home. But I barely have time to roll up the window before my father's standing beside the car, leaning down, opening my door. "Bethany, honey," he says. His voice is all wrong. Too hearty, too cheerful, too fake. "We're going to let you stay with your Aunt Muriel for a while. What would you think of that?" "Aunt Merrily, I think." "Aunt? I thought all my parents' brothers and sisters were dead. I thought my family was just Mom, Dad, and me." My father doesn't wait for my answer. He's hunched over the trunk now, pulling out a suitcase. "Just one? Mine? This is crazy. Because I am 12 years old, almost 13. But I've never spent a single night away from my parents. I've been invited to sleepovers, of course, but there was always some reason my parents had to come pick me up early. I had a swim meet the next day. My mother didn't want me tired out for school. It just wasn't a good time. 3 of my friends went away to camp last summer, and I asked to go too, but I didn't ask very persistently because I knew what the answer would be. The same one I always got. "No, maybe another time, when you're older." I thought "when you're older" was just code words for never. But here my father is, plunking my suitcase down on the sidewalk. It sits there looking alone and abandoned, and my father moves back to my car door to see why I haven't gotten out. "Bethany," he says. "I have a social studies test tomorrow," I say. "First period." And that's a ridiculous thing to say, because even if we drove all night, we wouldn't be home in time for me to make it to school first period. But I guess all day long, as I watched my mother cry, as I watched the unfamiliar landscapes fly by, I've been holding on to the notion that however strange today was, tomorrow would be normal again. Just another normal school day. "Bethany," my father says again, and some of the fakeness is chipped away, and I can hear the ache in every syllable of my name. "You have to stay here so I can get help for your mother." The emotion in his voice is completely raw now. I wince the way I would if I were staring at an open, gaping wound. I could ask plenty of questions. Where are you planning to go to get help for Mom? Why didn't you just have me stay with one of my friends back home? Who is this Aunt Merrily, anyway? Who's Elizabeth? But I can't even bear to meet my father's eyes. I get out of the car. My father circles around to the front and opens my mother's door. "Hillary," he says too loudly, "we're here. It's time to say goodbye to Bethany." Dad motions for me to come and stand next to him, so I'm there in time to see Mom staring dazedly out of the car. "No," she wails, and then she hurls herself at me and wraps her arms around me so tightly I can barely breathe. I'm taller than my mom now. I grew 7 inches in the past year, and it crosses my mind that my height might be the only thing saving me from suffocation. Mom buries her face in my shoulder, and I put my arms around her, but she's weeping so hard it's like trying to hold on to an earthquake. Her sobs shake us both. She won't let go until my father peels her hands off me. "I'm sorry," he says, and I can't tell if he's apologizing to me or to her. She collapses back into the car, and he leads me away. He retrieves my suitcase. He holds the gate open for me. We climb the porch stairs. All of it feels like a bad dream. Maybe that's why I'm so docile, so obedient, and dreams you don't have choices. You just do what you do, and in the morning you comfort yourself with the idea that none of it really happened. The woman Aunt Marilee grasps when I come into the light. Bethy, she breathes incredulously. Oh, Bethy. It's Bethany, I correct her irritably. But I don't think she hears me because she's bounding across the porch and throwing her arms around me in total joy. I hold myself stiff, partly because she's a complete stranger and partly because I've just been released from my mother's sorrow-racked hug, and it's too much of a jolt to go from that to the spontaneous burst of delirious happiness. After a few seconds, the woman releases me. Sorry, she mutters, forgot myself. You just look so much like... She glances quickly at my father and lets her voice trail off. You see how it is, my father says gruffly. The woman nods silently, and now there are tears in her eyes, too. Come on in, she says, holding the door open for us. I step across the threshold, but father doesn't follow. He looks down at the strip of metal dividing the wooden floor of the porch from the wooden floor of the foyer as if it's electrified and deadly, or as if, once he crosses it, he can never leave again. I really should be going, he says, glancing back at the car and at Mom. I step back toward my father. I've spooked myself thinking about dangerous and crossable doorways, and even though I'm nearly 13, I have to fight the urge to throw myself at my father's feet and wrap my arms around his legs and beg like a little child. No, Daddy, please don't go. My father hands me my suitcase like he knows what I want to do, and that's his way of stopping me. You'll be fine with your Aunt Marilee, he says, the fake heartiness back in his voice, and we won't be gone long. Will you be back for my birthday? I say forlorningly. I don't know why I asked that. My birthday's November 2nd, still more than a week away, and the question really does make me sound like a child. It's just that birthdays are a big deal in my family, and I'm not sure I can bear it if my parents are away then. I fully expect my father to say, yes, dear. Of course we'll be back long before your birthday with lots of presents. But I look up and my father is staring back at me in mute horror. He opens his mouth but no sound comes out. He reaches out and brushes his fingers against my cheek, cradling my face in his hand. And then his hand slips away and he stumbles off the porch, down the walkway, back to the car. He moves like he's drunk, though he couldn't be. He's barely even eaten today, let alone had anything to drink, and I've been with him for the past 15 hours, I would know. Really, except for school, I've spent virtually every second of my life with my parents. How could I not know what was wrong with them? How could they be leaving me now? Chapter 2. Well, the woman says, I'm still staring off after my parents' taillights, staring at empty street. I've practically forgotten the woman is there. No, Marilee, I remind myself, Aunt Marilee, but I've never called anyone Aunt before, so the name feels strange to me. I won't call you that, I think defiantly. I won't. Still, I tear my gaze away from the darkness where my parents used to be and glance up at Marilee. Up close, she doesn't look so old despite the white hair, despite the Miss Santa Claus robe. Her face has surprisingly few wrinkles, and her dark eyes are brimming with sympathy. Are you hungry, she asks. Would you like something to eat? I don't keep much food in the house, seeing as it's only me living here now. But I'm sure we could scare up something. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe. Chicken noodle soup, or... I'm not hungry, I say. Then, because some of my defiance has leaked into those 3 words, I add, no thank you. Okay, Marilee says evenly, but she doesn't seem to know what to say to me if she can't talk about food. She can't even look me straight in the eye. It's as if I'm hideously ugly, painful to look at, and I don't think I am. I've got long blonde hair that I once described in a school essay as cascading down my shoulders. My teacher took off points for that because he said it was an overwrought cliche. And truthfully, my hair doesn't really cascade, it just kind of lies there. I also wear narrow brown-rimmed glasses. My mother started bugging me a couple years ago to get contacts. But I like my glasses. My face would feel naked without them. I'm protected. Is that why my mother started crying because I fought with her about glasses? Is it all my fault? I can't let myself think about that right now, or else I might start crying right here in front of Marilee. I forced myself back to evaluating my appearance. Before I grew 7 inches in the past year, everyone always said I was tiny and cute. I don't think I'm any less cute for suddenly growing tall, but people can probably tell by looking me. I'm not used to being this height yet. I like to collect unusual words, hints, cascading, and hints. And the word I like to use about myself is coltish. So what if I'm a little wobbly on my legs right now? Someday I'll race the wind. Anyhow, tall and coltish sounds a lot better than tall and gawky, which is probably a more accurate description. Somehow I've survived 2 or 3 minutes of this strange woman staring at me without quite looking straight at me, but thinking about my appearance can last me only so long. I say, maybe I can use your phone? I feel brilliant suddenly. Why didn't I think of this sooner? I'll call my dad's cell phone and just tell him how ridiculous everything is. I don't want to stay here. He and Mom didn't want to leave me behind. Marilee doesn't seem to know what to do with me. So let's just undo everything and he'll come back and pick me up and we can all go together to get help for Mom. This was virtually the same plan that got me out of attending the first 3 months of first grade. But I don't care about seeming childish anymore. I'm picturing Mom and Dad and me riding off into the sunset together, or towards sunrise anyway. Then I see the turmoil my question has unleashed on Marilee's face. I don't think, she begins, starts again. Look, I know this is probably all very strange for you. It's strange for me too. I feel like if I forbid you to use the phone, it'll seem like you're trapped here, like I've kidnapped you or something. When actually, she lifts her hands helplessly, as if explaining exactly why I'd been dropped at her doorstep, is far beyond her verbal capabilities. Walter said it was very important you shouldn't try to contact anyone. I just want to call him, I say, and it's all I can do not to make my words in a whimper. I want my daddy. Well, Marilee wrinkles her brow, deliberates. Somehow in that moment I decide I like her. She's taking me seriously. I don't see how that could be a problem. I follow her down a hall and into a kitchen, but I don't pay much attention to any of it. Why should I if I'm just going to leave again in a few minutes? The phone is on the kitchen counter, and it's an old-fashioned landline, actually connected to the wall with a cord. I punch in the familiar number and put the phone to my ear. I hear one ring and a click, and then a computerized voice. We are sorry. This number is out of service. What? I say out loud. I've known my father's phone number since I was 4, but I must have misdialed. I hang up and pick up the phone again and push the numbers with exaggerated care. This time I check the numbers on the phone's digital screen. 484-555-9889. Yes. I lift the phone to my ear again. Ring. Click. Computerized voice. We are sorry. This number is out of service. I'm starting to panic. I try my father's number again. I dial my mother's number, even my own, though my phone broke yesterday, and that's why I don't have it with me now. And why did my phone break right before this bizarre trip? Was it just a coincidence? Or not? Out of service, out of service, out of service. I call the nationwide directory and ask for any listing for Walter, Hillary, or Bethany Cole, hometown Greenleaf, Pennsylvania. Checking, the computerized voice says. Then, we are sorry. We have no listing for any of those names. It's as if my family ceased to exist, as if we never existed. I collapsed against the kitchen counter, let the phone drop from my hand. There's not any real live human I can argue with or protest to. I feel a gentle hand on my back. I've forgotten about Marilee again. She's been standing here the whole time, listening to every word. I turn to face her. Isn't there any emergency number my father left with you? I choke out. Some way to reach him if I break my arm, or my throat closes over my next words. I can't say them. Or if I just need him. Marilee's eyes are filled with fear now, fear and confusion and something I can't quite read. But slowly, she shakes her head no. Chapter 3. Marilee tucks me in bed. I go along with her, as compliant as a rag doll. She carries my suitcase to an upstairs bedroom, helps me pull out my pajamas, and helps me to slip them on. And I don't care that this stranger sees me half naked. I don't care that she's treating me like a 5-year-old. My brain doesn't start functioning again until she's pulled the down comforter up to my chin and turned out the light and murmured, "Things will look better in the morning. They always do." Then when I'm lying there wide awake in the darkness, some tiny, tiny part of my mind comes alert to goad me. "You're overreacting." Except I'm not. It'd be one thing if my parents were like the adults I've seen dropping their kids off late for school, or smacking their toddlers in the grocery store, or growling at their teenagers at the mall. Stop bugging me. If I belonged to any of those parents, I wouldn't be all that surprised to be foisted off on a stranger in the middle of nowhere with no way to reach Mom and Dad. Okay, maybe I'd be surprised even then. But it's just a million times worse because my parents are the most careful, overprotective, parentish people I've ever seen. Even when I was little, they never hired a babysitter for me. When I was 4 or 5, probably 5, after I'd watched Gretchen Dunlap across the street go off to kindergarten while I was being homeschooled, I somehow got wind of the fact that other kids sometimes have babysitters that let them jump on couch cushions and eat all the cookies they wanted and even go to bed without brushing their teeth. I wanted that too, so I asked my parents for a babysitter of my own. I remember my parents looking sad, disappointed maybe, even hurt. And then my mother bent down on her knees in front of me and said, "Oh, honey, why would we want to spend even a second away from our baby? You don't need a sitter, you've got us." All the time, always, forever. She even agreed to let me jump on the couch and eat too many cookies and skip brushing my teeth every once in a while. But somehow I knew it wasn't the same. And when my parents take me to the mall, they don't go to the boring stores and make me sit and wait while they pick out vacuum cleaners or refrigerators or ties or anything for themselves. They sing out, "This shopping trip is all about you." And even when we're loaded down with bags of jeans for me and sweaters for me and new DVDs for me, they still beg, "Isn't there anything else you want us to buy?" The last time we went on one of those shopping trips, I spent the whole time whining, "You're embarrassing me, and stop being so loud." And nobody else I know has to stick with their parents the whole time at the mall. Guilt surges through me as I'm laying here in the bed in Merle's house. It feels like the ceiling is opened up and a huge bolt of guilt lightning has zapped me. Oh no, what if my parents know how ungrateful I am and this is their way of teaching me a lesson? I close my eyes and I can hear voices echoing in my head. Gretchen Dunlap from across the street is telling me, "My mom says you're the most spoiled kid she's ever seen. So there." We were 5 or 6 and snarling at my mom, "You're driving me crazy. Just leave me alone," after she offered to braid my hair when I was nervous about a swim meet. That was before she started crying, I tell myself. I wasn't mean to her after she started crying. Why would they drop me off in this strange place and then vanish now? And then I feel almost disappointed because my parents doing this to teach me a lesson would be strange, but sort of understandable. Without that explanation, I've got nothing. Maybe none of this has anything to do with me, I think. And that's a big leap for me. My parents have spent my entire life telling me how important I am, how much they love me, how everything in their lives revolves around me. Maybe things changed, I think. Maybe now I'm just in the way. I swallow a lump in my throat, but I can't believe this explanation either. Even a long, long time ago, before she became a permanent fountain of tears, I can remember my mother looking at me and starting